Welcome everyone to another round of Deadlock Fight Night. Kicking things off with EU. I'm ZP here with Jason. And Jason, it's going to be interesting here. Once again, a lot has changed in 1 week. And of course, we got two new teams.
Oh man, obviously we have the patch change, which was massive, but we also did have last week if you missed it, or maybe you tuned in at the very end there of the recap. Buff Enjoyers falling to Pojilaya Skumbriya, which was quite a surprise. However, Hydra Nation still going to be going on strong with 3 wins back to back to back. But man, the patch, I'm hoping it shakes some things up here because there were some massive changes and we could see a complete change in what kind of heroes we see.
Well, before we get super deep into that, if you're just tuning on in, this is the format we got for you here today and every day here at Deadlock Fight Night. And it's quite simple. We got 2 challenging teams every week. The winner of the teams in our challenging match go on to face our champion in a best of 3s. So you get 3 teams in each region, 3 in EU, 3 in NA. And as you mentioned, Jason, we've already seen some turnover where Pojilaya Skumbriya came in hot last week and they took down the champions of Buff Enjoyers.
I'm just going to put this in chat, by the way. If you are legal drinking age, every time ZP says Pojilaya Skumbriya differently, take a shot. And I don't know how you're going to make it past the first game, to be honest. But yeah, honestly,
you're trying to kill people.
Well, not directly. But I do like, this format. It's so great to be able to give, teams a chance to kind of show what they've got, potentially challenge against the best teams from each region. I'm waiting, more importantly, I guess, for an NA team to rise up and be able to challenge Hydra Nation for once, like properly challenge them, because they seem to be unbeatable when it comes to North America.
Yeah, Hydra Nation, they've been called a super team, and for good reason. But you know what else is pretty super? Deadlock Fight Night is proud to present our new line of merch. One of the best ways you can support this broadcast and help us keep the lights on is to get gooped. Available in t-shirt and sweatshirt variants, getting gooped directly supports the Deadlock Fight Night brand and helps us ensure that we can keep paying players and put on this production for you. We think it's pretty funny. Hopefully you do too. So go ahead, buy a shirt that you'll have a pretty hard time explaining to people. Head over to the deadlockfightnight.com and order today. Jason already bought 3.
It's true. 3, one for me, one for my fiance, and one for my lovely little doggo, Oliver. Luckily, they had a size for him, which was fantastic. If you guys, of course, have any ideas as well, you can head over to the website. There's a comment section where you can suggest things. You can talk about the broadcast. Also, you can maybe even suggest what you'd like to see on some official merch as well.
But now getting into it here, our first 2 challenging teams of the day, it's going to be DMS taking on the Deadlock Dudes. And Deadlock Dudes, you think back to recent tournaments here, they were actually able to send Maidong to the lower bracket. They weren't quite able to win in the rematch later on, but EU has a lot of teams that are up and coming here, Jason. And of course, DMS we've already seen here on Deadlock Fight Night. They're kind of veterans, so it's a very interesting early matchup here, and already some names here. I know you got a lot to talk about for some of the members of DMS, especially Play With Me.
Oh man, his Wraith. Oh, I missed that week because I was gone in China, but to come back and do the recap, just seeing what he did on Wraith was insane. But also for DMS, they had a slight roster swap, right? Saf used to play with 3-6 Mafia, who played against them, I believe, in week 2, if I'm not mistaken, and he's actually joined the roster. So has Prestis. So they've gone for a couple of switch ups. I'm curious to see how it's going to kind of elevate DMS to the next level. And as you mentioned with Deadlock Dudes, I mean, they might not be a common name for you guys at home, but they have been able to challenge the likes of Buff Enjoyers, like getting to that part of the event multiple times where they finished second, losing to Buff Enjoyers in the Community Gaming Open tournament, and going 3rd place where they lost to Maidong, like you mentioned before, but losing to Buff Enjoyers in the winter bracket final. So I have a lot of expectations for this team. They also have some really good players. I mean, ZP, you're probably going to recognize Elevote just because he played in the OWL under Washington Justice, and of course under Paris Eternal, if I'm not mistaken. But they do have an extensive roster of ex-pro players. I mean, even Shallow was a PUBG pro player for PC. Xenon was a Valorant pro player as well. I think the only one that doesn't have like a big competitive background experience is WZQT. But you know what? I feel like with the players like that on your roster, you're going to get caught up really quickly.
Well, we're about to dive deeper into what has changed over the course of this week, but we're not going to be doing it alone. Of course, we got the one and only DDK rejoining us. Dan, it's us 3 all day today, and we got a lot to go through here, especially in Deadlock, where everything changes week to week, almost literally.
Yeah, a lot of big themes this week. It's definitely a big lift for us to try to like theory craft everything with basically like a limitation on the data and the sample sizes are small. It's great. So basically, we're going to end up talking about a bunch of stuff that and predictions that may not be true. Favorite thing.
Well, speaking of predictions, we got a lot of things to theorycraft here because, of course, a big patch hit between Deadlock Fight Night 3 and number 4, and we're going to kick things off here by taking a look at the hero changes where Shiv, public enemy number 1 for a lot of people in pub games, Jason, and he got hit a little bit with the nerf bat, and yet maybe we'll still see some of them here today.
Yeah, I mean, he had the highest win rate in Deadlock Fight Night for us by a pretty decent amount. I think he was around like the 70%. I think he's still around 70% at the moment, though we did see him have a couple of losses last week. But man, for us, like the biggest changes obviously is bloodletting, right? We talked so many times about how hard it is to burst Shiv down. And the fact now is, if you want to be kind of on the same or similar level to what you were before in terms of like how effective that ability would be, you'd have to level it up very early on. So for me, Shiv early game has definitely been reeled back quite a bit, DDK.
Yeah, it's interesting because this looks like, if you're like, oh my god, there's so many changes, like sort of nerf varying things about Shiv, it does still feel to me like, based on sort of my experience playing and just based on what I've seen, that this may look a lot worse than it actually is, because across the board, obviously, some of the more key elements are being nerfed, like bloodletting, like you mentioned, which is all about the tankiness and sort of how Shiv is able to sustain in these fights. You've got elements to how long the rage meter is able to stay up during these fights and how quickly you can build it, so that's been nerfed as well. And the killing blow is a slightly shorter range, as we can see also. So, presumably a little bit less mobility. But practically speaking, I'm feeling like this isn't really going to change the pick rates of Shiv all that much, although it looks like it maybe should. Where do you feel this is going, ZP?
It's hard to say because I think you take a look, especially at scrims and also Eternus games, Shiv's still getting picked a lot. I think Shiv is going to be a character that I think the real change will be it might not be the ultimate pick priority that it's been, but it's hard to say because NA loves themselves some Shiv. But of course, Shiv was not the only character that received some pretty big changes over the course of the last week. You take a look, you got changes going in the Vindicta, changes going in the Talon, and we got slides for those also. And I'm curious the most on the Vindicta changes because right now, teams have had pretty set-in-stone preferences for who you want to run in more of a carry role. A lot of due deference given to Wraith, still seeing Haze in the mix. Warden was pretty popular, but might see a downtrend just because of changes in Majestic Leap. So Vindicta, I feel like, has gotten multiple buffs over several patches, Jason, and eventually just hits a point where people realize, wait, this character is actually good now. And this could be Vindicta's week as a result.
It could be. I think one thing we have to keep in mind when it comes to Vindicta and Great Town is that you have to fight in very specific locations to be very effective with these two heroes, because obviously you want to stay away from the fight, right? You want to stay in the air, you want to stay pretty far back, so that kind of limits where you can technically fight with them successfully. However, looking at the fact that your fire rate now scales with Spirit Power, which you built Spirit Power anyways with Vindicta, means she shoots a lot quicker. But Dan, the number 3 one there, Assassinate no longer splits to allies. I feel like this could make Vindicta snowball insanely fast.
Yeah, I feel good for Vindicta, able to actually get the rewards from her work. No longer having this wealth redistribution going on, and actually able to power up as the carry, which is kind of what you want to see on a carry, because Vindicta, I think, has a pretty big power spike when Assassinate comes online in that mid game, in a similar way to how we describe a Paradox core swap coming online, and now suddenly you can get a lot of advantages in varying lanes. Vindicta, due to the ability to fly and then have the Assassinate do a lot of burst damage and get rewarded for those last hits, which you can definitely guarantee on a lot of different kills, there is now a potential that Vindicta could get a pretty huge soul lead and then scale way better going into the late game, which is where I felt like Vindicta would usually fall off a bit, because Vindicta's pretty item dependent like any carry.
Yeah, I think the potential for Vindicta to snowball and get that all-important 5 to 10k soul lead over the opposition, which is really what you want on a carry, to be not only very hard to kill, but also able to just take down characters quickly. The odds of doing it more are in your favor if Assassinate isn't being generous with your team. But moving ahead and taking a look at Talon got a few changes too. We're going to touch on very quickly if we're going into the bigger system changes. I don't think that this is enough to get Talon into the meta at this level of play, because Talon, the higher up you go in MMR, the less he's played. But I also think it's another situation where you keep giving Talon more and more buffs over time. Eventually, it's going to hit a point where teams realize, wait, maybe we should be giving this guy a shot, Jason.
Well, you say that, ZP. I did a quick little interview with Hydration, which you guys are going to see later on in the show, and he was talking about how powerful Great Talon is now, because the biggest problem with Great Talon was survivability. And the fact now that your movement speed scales again with Spirit Power, even the base extra regen helps out. It makes it a lot harder to close that gap against Great Talon, allowing him to play a lot safer. So I'm not necessarily fully disagreeing with you, because that's definitely the higher level play you get to, it becomes much harder to be successful on when you have to deal with all the actives. But he's making it sound like we could potentially see Great Talon coming into the mix here within this week, next week.
Yeah, I'll add a point there as well, because I think Great Talon actually has a lot of suppressing power in one sense, in that the spirit damage is pretty insane, and it's kind of like for me it's reminiscent of Yamato in terms of how much burst spirit damage you can get and how quickly you can get it. And so if you're just like hanging out, obviously that spirit damage can be connected at pretty long ranges as well. So Talon, I think, has a great place in terms of pushing, and in terms of if you position him well in fights to do massive damage output. So I kind of agree. I've actually been sad that we haven't seen him more, and I hope that we get to see him played by some really high level players, so that we can really see what those dynamics look like at the higher level.
Well, speaking of changing dynamics, perhaps the biggest change from week to week that we're going to be looking at here today is the change to the urn, where now urn, less of a snowball win harder mechanic when ahead, just because the fact that if you're ahead, you're going to have to turn it into enemy territory. Conversely, if you're able to get control of the urn early when you're behind by 10% net worth, you're going to be able to turn it in more friendly territory. And more than anything else, to me, more so than position on the map, relative to the teams, the biggest thing to me when I look at this, Jason, is what this does for certain heroes in the ability to fight in these areas, especially the closed-in turn-in that's near the red camp. It's a McGinnis playground where you could just wall people off, get good turret setups. Some characters, I feel like, benefit from this more than others.
Yeah, and obviously, like, forcing fights in close quarter combat is extremely hard to do, especially if you're trying to play with some of these carries, depending on obviously your solely, because it is a 10% net worth difference before you either have to go into their territory or your own territory. I kind of wonder, because in my eyes, Dan, we've seen a lot of teams use the urn as a way to facilitate a team fight, as in, okay, we're going to take the urn, we're going to go near the air to turn it in, but we're going to force you to contest us, or you give it to us for free. So either we get the turn in for free, or we're going to get a fight that we want and most likely win. So it kind of forces the enemy team's hand in that sense.
Yeah, it is a really interesting dynamic in the sense that it does feel like it, because the mid boss, for example, if you're looking at the two, I suppose, like high value in terms of like souls or buffs that you can get, it's like the mid boss and the urn are the two big things you want to be moving your team to fight for. Or if you're able to get a kill on the enemy team, that can make it so that's an easier pickup, that's going to roll into that. And before this change, it just feels like the winning team is just going to be somewhat guaranteed the urn in most cases. We have seen some specific scenarios where a team that has really good team fight, if they're able to set it up well, even if they're behind quite a bit, they can still make it work. But at the same time, it still feels like so risky that it can just snowball out of control very easily. And it feels like there are a lot of changes that are trying to reward teams for how well they play around positioning, and trying to mitigate the advantage gained from souls and map control that comes from those natural advantages if you are like 20, 30, 40k souls ahead. So it feels actually like a natural comeback mechanic now at this point, where there is a sense where the team that is maybe, let's say, 11% ahead, they're not going to necessarily want to pick up the urn, but they might not contest you picking it up, but they will actually try to take a fight there. And then if they can't win it, they'll just give it up. So as opposed to previously, where that's going to be a more drawn out fight across the map, and it's going to potentially be a huge problem for the team that's behind, because they can't realistically turn it in, and you're still trying to apply resources because you also can't give it away for free. So it's like it becomes this very impossible question for the team that's behind. So I think this is a great solve to begin to make the game more about the team fights and less about just snowballing an advantage you got in the mid game.
Well, earn changes were not the only thing changed on the macro level. The other big change, of course, is what has been done to pushing, but we'll get to that in a moment. We still have our Majestic Leap to go over, where, honestly, the biggest thing for me, Jason, when I look at this is 100% another nerf to Pocket after multiple nerfs to Pocket have come in over time. And, you talk about the idea of, oh, hey, if a hero gets buffed and buffed and buffed, when do you hit the point where it's like, okay, we need to play this? Well, particularly for the characters depending on Majestic Leap, particularly for someone like Pocket that's just gotten hit with the nerf stick repeatedly, is this the thing that shoves it over the edge to where, no, we're not going to play this hero as much anymore?
Yeah, I think that's a possibility. And honestly, I don't think we need to go too much necessarily into this because we still have like the game almost ready to go. Yeah. But the fact is, the cooldown change, as you said from experience when we were talking about this before, a massive change and very noticeable. Whether you want to use it for movement around the map, you have to be very cautious about when the fight's going to happen. But of course, players like Pocket or heroes like Pocket, you can't drop down, similar with like Lash, similar with Warden as well. So it makes it very difficult to actually get into a fight properly.
Yeah, it's. I feel sorry for you, ZP. I know. I think maybe there are some. Actually, I feel sorry for you, and I feel sorry for Walex, because I feel like Walex's whole Bebop build actually relies heavily upon the Majestic Leap and also the drop down, being able to change position with the drop down, or the down slap as they call it, and then being able to like have new hook angles or new angles of the hyper beam. All that stuff kind of goes away a little bit, and it's going to be harder to set up with it. So, pretty sad for the Majestic Leap enjoyers out there.
We're going to speed through the last point here as the teams are ready, but Walker changes. This is really interesting in the sense that I feel like in a sense it almost helps teams come back a little bit, just because Walkers are so vulnerable at 14 minutes, and it's really not that deep into the game, where if a lane even gets pushed up a little bit, it's really easy to send someone over and get a Walker in a way that you couldn't necessarily do pre-patch.
Yeah, I think this is... Oh, sure. Yeah, I think this is really cool for multiple reasons. One, like the Unchange, it's like, okay, with the Unchange, we don't feel like the team that has naturally more map control because they're ahead should also just get free earns. Here it's like, okay, we're trying to solve the fact that if you're the team that's behind in the mid game, you're probably behind on flex slots, and that's what is invariably going to end up killing you, because you end up losing even more souls because you have to make sacrifices on your build, where maybe you have to sell things you otherwise wouldn't want to sell. So this creates an interesting scenario where it mitigates that, and it gives the opportunity that you kind of have to, if you're the team that's ahead, you don't want to give up walkers. So if there is like split pushing happening, you have to be much more mindful of your lane control to avoid flex slots just going away for free. So I feel like this will make teams have to have better macro to stay ahead, which I like.
I could just hear Mitch right now just wincing every time one of us says macro. According to the feedback we got last week about it's map control. No, yeah, completely agree. And I really want to see how teams really push this, especially the teams who know how to split push properly. A team like Hydra Nation, I feel like, is going to have a field day with this if they don't already get 4 walkers down by the 14-minute mark.
Yeah, do we need a segment where we just explain macro? Because
I will
die on this hill.
No, I think we're all macro enjoyers, but ZP, I think we're like
we're also draft enjoyers
for our first match.
Yeah. So draft-wise, DMS, Deadlock Dudes into it. Deadlock Dudes, the EU standard, they get rid of Wraith immediately, first ban, and I don't really think that's something that's going to change because, of course, Wraith herself didn't get too nerfed down in the last week.
Man, we saw him 2 weeks ago. Absolutely dominated teams on his Wraith, but we did see when they met up against Buff Enjoyers, they're like, we'll take the Wraith away. We're not going to let you do it.
And you see the Mirage going away for DMS, where Mirage also, I feel like, has just gone up and up in value, especially in EU, where people just say, you know what, we don't want to deal with this. We don't want to deal with your early lane pressure. We don't want to deal with your general carry potential lane in the game. And wow, okay.
It's happening.
Okay.
Love to see it. Yeah, Great Talon coming in immediately. And again, I feel like for me, Great Talon is like the ranged Yamato, because like we have the power slash for Yamato, yeah, she's going to get in close. Great Talon is going to have, with the power shot, extreme amounts of spirit damage that he can just pump out in similar burst fashion, and you can have a lot of builds that focus around getting that ability to do insane damage and have like really fast cooldowns. So I think it's going to be interesting to see how that plays out. I think it's going to be valuable. I would talk about the Mirage ban, but I think we've got a lot of stuff happening here for DMS. The Infernus and the Ivy picked up.
Bro, I don't even want to talk about those picks just yet. I want to talk about Great Talon some more, honestly. Like I know I mentioned it before, but it really does kind of control the positions that you can play from. And like we saw last week, dealing with Wallets on the Bebop, if teams are smart, you just don't fight in areas where Great Talon can really punish you. So I'm curious to see how DMS are going to work around this, obviously with how strong Great Talon is. But also one thing I think you can't underestimate, as you pointed out, Dan, with Vindicta, is that trap can do quite a, it's not the stake like Vindicta, but that trap does give you so much control in a fight. Can be used obviously aggressively and defensively to save yourself or try to catch someone out.
Yeah, I kind of want to talk about Talon more as well, but I felt like
do it. You got the paradox paired with it.
I was just going to say that the ult as well is really interesting, because if you're going for those spirit builds, you can do a really effective across map ganks with like coordinating off of the ult, which you might not have as much in your ranked games, but at this level of play, there's actually a lot of coordination that can really result in some really powerful early ganks when that stun and that burst damage is really strong. So I would hope that we see that too.
I also love, regardless of meta right now, the one thing you can just rely on in Deadlock, regardless of region, is Geist getting picked in the 3-4 slot. Regardless, like, it just keeps happening where it's like, yeah, you know, Geist is a really solid hero. Of course, still offers really good control. Mystic Reverb build, I think, even with some Malice nerfs, is still pretty darn effective. So, yeah, the Geist coming in 3 doesn't surprise me. I think this is the interesting part, though, Jason, as we look at values here. Warden was usually picked where Haze was just picked now for Deadlock dudes, and I think that's the effect of the Majestic Leap nerf, changing some valuations where you'll probably see more Haze today as opposed to Warden.
I don't know how I feel about the Haze pick. We haven't seen her. We didn't see her at all last week, if I'm not mistaken. We did see her the week before when paired with the Warden, right? We talked about like the sleep dart into the Binding Word, which might be exactly what we're going to see here. So I'm expecting a Haze Warden lane, obviously. I just don't know how effective Haze can be, because there's just so many strong counters to her. And I do wonder if I don't know if it's a bug or what it is necessarily, or if I'm even mistaken, but when ulting one target with Haze, you do like double damage, if I'm not mistaken. I don't know if that's intended or not. I don't know. Dan, do you have any thoughts about the Haze?
Well, Wraith obviously got banned. You got rid of Mirage as well. Although I don't really classify Mirage really similarly to Haze, but you know, Mirage does have a lot of like gun damage. So in terms of like the type of damage, at least you're going to get a lot of gun damage out of Haze. And Infernus is on the other team. So I guess if you're trying to go for a hard carry, then it makes sense if you want someone that's going to be gobbling up the jungle. So perhaps that's the angle they're going to take, and they're just going to have to rely a lot on Pocket being very active with the Warden and Kelvin in the mid game, whilst Haze is trying to get up like that. So we'll see how that goes. But I am curious about the comp overall. It does feel interesting. I'm not sure how I feel about it.
I mean, we just talked about the Majestic Leap changes, and two of the heroes we specifically talked about with the changes get picked for Deadlock dudes. I don't know if they read the patch notes. Obviously, I'm kidding, guys. They know what they're doing, but very interesting to see those picked together.
I think the other thing that's interesting here is, especially relative to NA, where the character is almost first pick, first ban stats a lot of the time, is no McGinnis. And that's even with the earn changes. Yeah, the fact that McGinnis isn't picked here by either of these two teams is a little bit shocking to me, given how strong I feel like McGinnis is at the moment, and especially its prevalence in NA, where, God, you talk about a difference between the two regions. EU, very high value on Wraith, not as high value on McGinnis. NA, usually very high value McGinnis, not as high value on Wraith. And look, that continues here today, but not getting picked or banned at all really does shock me.
Kind of like DMS's comp though at the same time. I mean, honestly, I haven't even like really looked at it other than when you mentioned the Geist, because I was just so infatuated with seeing the Great Talon. But this is going to be interesting because they got a very beefy lineup, and they do have a lot of mobility with Abrams and Ivy.
All right, well, DMS versus Deadlock dudes. We'll be rejoined by Dan after this game commences. But now, Jason, as we get into it, we're going to see what has changed here for DMS in their week off of Deadlock Fight Night, and we get our first look of Deadlock dudes here on the program, and also, more importantly, first look at Talon, where I believe this is the first time Talon has been picked in all these weeks. So
in all of our weeks, we've had Vindicta picked once, we've had Great Talon 0, and Mo and Krill 0.
The 0 Mo and Krill... The 0 Mo and Krill actually surprises me. Like, it makes sense because I don't remember casting Mo and Krill here, but it's interesting how Mo just hasn't been quite there. But
you talked about it as a good counter to Yamato, and I think you have a very valid point. The fact that you can ult her, and then guess what? She can't pop her shadow transformation, and you can kill her and make that refresher inevitably useless. But as we are about to kick things off here, I'm also curious about how these lanes are going to play out. What are the matchups? We do have Warden not paired with Haze, but Warden Paradox is a pretty similar comp. when you have the kinetic carbine, you'll be able to stun into the binding ward as well. Haze for 7, I think that's going to be a lane where Haze can kind of put some serious work into 7, considering he's so weak early on.
Yeah, I mean, you expect Haze to at least go even in that lane, but right now we're taking a look at the 2 lane, Kelvin and paired up with Talon. And for me, I'm so interested to see how this lane goes and if it's going to be one of those games where Talon gets ahead or not.
I like it, man. I like it. You can get the sustain to Talon to help mitigate any sort of like early aggression onto him with the heal from your frost grenade, but not to mention you can also slow for the 1 to hit. I don't remember the name of the one off the top of my head, but the 1 for Great Talon to hit to allow it to put a lot of extra chip damage into.
Always.
Yeah, the charge shot, and also it's scary in the level of poke damage you can do at times where you'll just go through a lane and go, wait, where'd all my HP go? It's like, well, yeah, those 2 charge shots and away it goes. But also, you talk about pressure early on. Play with me. Having a difficult lane already versus Elvo. 160 HP. This is the level where you're not getting efficient CS half the time because you have to be so careful of just dying to 1 power slash.
Yeah, very, very careful. And you definitely want to fall behind his pocket, especially with the changes we said, for instance, to Majestic Leap as well. And we've seen Yamato, like, together, for instance, Pojilaya, Skumbriya just be so effective. We're going to see Warden caught out here. Xenon's going to go down. Elevote will be able to at least trade 1-for-1 here in the 3 lane. So in the end, not too big of a difference between the 2 with a 1-for-1 trade.
Yeah, I mean, in those situations, early, if the person's going to dive on you with Flame Dash, at the very least, you need to make sure he pays for it. Lest Infernus have a good opening for you. So far, the Kelvin Talon lane, relatively quiet, not a huge difference between the 2. Are pushing up, though. Decent damage going on to the Abrams. Abrams though, is almost dead, actually. They're chasing down McLovin as we speak. Got real low there, Jason.
I was hoping for McLovin on McGinnis, to be honest, but not going to be safe. Yeah, we are aware, guys, by the way. The names have been swapped, or will be swapped in a second, as Deadlock dudes are on the right-hand side of your screen, and DMS are indeed on the left-hand side. But Great Talon, as you know, Dan was talking about, that the pressure of your owl can be so overwhelming because you have global presence with it, and you have to be wary. Like, if you're low in one of these lanes and you hear that screech, you better retreat, you better run, you better hide. And we do see a parry come in. We do see a gank coming in as well here out of Infernus, and they're trying to take down McLovin, and they're going to be successful. Great gank coming out of Shaolin.
Yeah, quick low rotation from the Infernus gets the job done. And you talk about pressure on the 7 versus the Haze. Well, 7's not feeling pressured anymore at 2.2 to 1.3. That's now, as Haze goes back, that's now a painful lane to deal with, Jason. And also, on the other hand, recoveries, Elevote and Play With Me equalizing out after Elevote nearly put Play With Me in the ground at the very beginning.
I'm kind of surprised to see, well, not necessarily surprised to see Abrams in a dual lane, but it can be so overwhelming towards the lane. But then again, when you have a Yamato on a team, you have a 7 on a team, kind of need to get up some solo lanes. But that, I wouldn't have been really too sad to see 7 put into a dual lane, because that stun can be very daunting inside of a lane. But we're already see a gank on the 1 lane here. We do see Abrams, played by Saf, to be looking for a gank, but I believe Pocket has backed away in time.
Yeah, I mean, a little bit of pressure there. Could have been a charge if Pocket was a little bit to the right of the lane, but Play With Me playing at where I think you need to in that lane, just a little bit more to the left as Pocket, plenty of options for escape, and not the easiest thing for an Abrams to come in and get a gank on.
Well, we are about to hit, well, we just hit the 4-minute mark. I'm kind of keeping an eye on where we're going to see potential ganks coming through again. We're going to start to see these walkers be toppled relatively soon as we see the pressure again coming out of this Great Talon and Kelvin lane. And we can see Ivy being very respectful from this. You can see a lot of people on the blue side, or I guess it is DMS side, going to be low on health here. Actually, sorry, I'm getting even confused myself because Deadlock dudes. All right, it's the names that are backwards, the player names. I keep getting that confused. My bad.
Well, taking a look at the lane 4 and what's going on right now, 7 at 3.6, Haze at 2.5. That's one of the biggest differences. Ooh, guys, under pressure, drops a nice bomb. It's good poke damage. Going back in onto Warden. Ernest following Xenon, able to finish it off with the binding order, and Xenon with 2. That's dangerous. You don't want Warden to get that level of farm early on. Very important team fight going down in lane 3.
Well, Great Talon open things up with Owl, man. That's exactly what they did. To like open it up, gets a nice stun, get some good damage in. They're able to confirm that into 2 kills themselves. So a very good timed Owl, and that's kind of what we're expecting at Great Talon. I think kind of people forget about if you don't see Great Talon often, or you don't play against Great Talon often. Again, is that global presence.
Great Talon, leap into the sky. Good solid damage onto the Abrams. It's actually scary how much damage Talon's leap does there, Jason. It's like deceptively high, especially now his rate of fire is a little bit slower. But it's like, oh wait, I've lost half my HP in 4 shots.
Yeah, you really have to respect it. I mean, that's just kind of the name of the game for Great Talon, I'd say, as we do see the push coming in onto Hayes. Elevate looking to come in as well to try to back him up and protect him up against this Infernus. We'll see the swap go in, gets caught by the wall as well here, ZP.
It was a really nice raw swap coming in from Elevate on the Paradox, but still not enough to finish off Infernus just yet. Infernus drops a Flame Dash, more damage in return. Still see the chase coming in. Carbine coming off cooldown. Although, gonna go up the chase. Looks, drops. Not gonna be enough to get the kill on Infernus. It is. McLovin has to invest the bullet dance, though, make it happen.
Yeah, so some really heavy ganks invested here out of DMS. We did see WZQT go down on the Grey Talon while we were watching their fight break out, but we're seeing, you know, DMS, they're willing to go for these ganks, they're willing to go for these pushes. There's a great read, though, out of Paradox to be there to protect the Haze and try to keep him alive, which in the end did work out for him. So good, really good map awareness. I'm really liking to see teams who kind of rotate with their opponents to try to counter things. I'm still kind of curious how this pocket Yamato lane's gonna go, and I got to give credit to Shallow, able to, I don't even know how to say his name correctly. Shallowy to get close here, considering how the early game was going to McLovin. He should be going down. The stun landed.
17 a lot of tower damage. Can't finish the job just yet. Needs one more shot. Drops the lightning ball. No way. No way. McLovin
and the owl
gets away. The owl. Oh.
I was actually hoping that we'd see McLovin come in on the Haze and go for the kill on that owl, but we do see Pocket getting really aggressive here.
Pocket getting aggro. Warp side. Oh, runs into the Abrams, or more accurately, the Abrams runs into him. Gonna get the gank that time, and it is just exploded here, Jason, in all lanes, especially the solo lanes. 1 and 4 seeing a lot of action.
Yeah, good little rotation, not to mention a good owl. Xenon again for another kill. He's at 6k souls right now, and Geist, I mean, Prestis, I don't know how long he's been able to survive this. Sort of used to swap, try to chase the ward and back down, but somehow Xenon escapes this.
Xenon and McLovin with incredible escapes in the last minute here, Jason, costing DMS some real serious souls. The action doesn't stop here. No, pressure onto the Guardian.
Getting pushed quite hard here. I mean, he's eventually going to be able to escape this one. He's going to back away, but I think they're going to lose the Guardian off of this one. You can see Pocket retreating away. They still have 2 other players to help assist this. That's Geist is going to be coming in from the lane as well. So they're just going to give it up completely here. Well, in the meantime, McLovin is pushing that 4 lane by himself with no one to contest, and they're looking to try to get that first flex slot unlocked.
Kelvin dropping the shelter here on lane 2. Still a 3-man push from DMS in. Guardian's going to go down. 3 rotated from Deadlock dudes into lane 2. I don't think they're going to overly dive here just yet. Looks like rotation selling, but in lane 4, Jason, you got the 2-on-1, and McLovin not going to make the great escape this time.
Well, he did commit. He got the Guardian down. Unfortunately, it's only the second one, not the third, as we did see DMS capitalize and get their third and their first flex slot unlocked. But we do see a push back on the 1 lane here. Again, the back is going to be here for DMS. Yamato's going to be going in initially, trying to catch out Grey Talon and doing some decent damage, but Grey Talon is just too slippery at the moment.
Talon's getting pretty low, though, in the middle of it. Gets finished off. Play with me. Dashes up and over. Concussive combustion in. Looking for the finish on the Xenon. They're going to get it. So nice rotation from DMS to even things out here in lane 1.
I like this, though. You can see the instant response at a Deadlock dudes are like, okay, we're going to push lane 3. We're to get that Guardian. That's our flex slot unlocked. And maybe they're looking to rotate over into the 4 lane, potentially cash out, play with me. But we are about 30 seconds out here, ZP, from the first buff coming out from both sides of the map. So I'm kind of curious to see how both of these 2 teams are going to set up for that position. We can currently see Saf on the Abrams and Psycho on the Yamato, clearing out the enemy jungle on the left-hand side as they're potentially going to look for that buff. And it looks like actually DMS could potentially get away with both buffs here if Deadlock dudes don't do something about this.
Teams value buffs a lot more now, Jason. You see it's the biggest change, I feel like, in competitive Deadlock just in the last month, where players are just a lot better at always valuing, making a good run for it. You see the 3 versus 3 on left, 3 on 3 on right. Buff is coming up right now. Grabbed early by the Warden of Xenon, and they finish off Abrams. Quick trade-off for the buff, and they don't get the buff at the same time. Really nice for Deadlock dudes on the left.
Yeah, I like also the kinetic dash being picked up by Great Talon, trying to go for the chase on Yamato as the team is going to be there to back him up as well. The Guardian's already low on HP, so they can carry it to go for the finish. And they go for Yamato. Psycho gets demolished here, and they get the final Guardian on the side of Deadlock, of DMS.
Yeah, and you look at this Guardian situation between both teams.
You see, I'm sorry to interrupt you. You seeing this, man? I mean,
yeah, I see
the wall
movement.
jumps as well for Great Talon. Like, I'm starting to get really hopeful that we're going to see more Great Talon in the future with these changes, because that is a masterclass on movement.
Well, you know, you start getting into, well, how powerful is this character really? This is over-the-hill Great Talon. It's not even prime Great Talon. Imagine Great Talon when he was young. If he's pulling this stuff off, you know, in his 50s or 60s, however old he might be. He looks kind of decrepit.
Let's not get ageist here, okay? 50, 60, some of us are getting close to that. But we do have the change to earn, right? Look on the mini-map here, ladies and gentlemen. It's going to be over towards DMS side that they have to push into enemy territory if they want to go for the turn-in. We can immediately see DMS starting to regroup towards that position as well. You can see Ivy coming back, Geist coming back. The only one pushed right now is Infernus, and this is what we were also, mentioning before, is if you go for a commit into the enemy lines like this, it allows slow push to be done to you.
Yeah, they're fighting close quarters too versus the Abrams. Dangerous business at best, but here we go. Wall is down, elbow, looking for a swap, and the chaos is up close and personal, and DMS very happy for this fight. Huge value off the guys, elbow dashing around, but the guys just and Abrams together. Jason got so much done. I think we got a 2-for-1 punch. We got high value off the bomb.
Get the urn, turn it in, it's right next to it. Okay, 7 gets it, I'm so sorry. I was like hoping, like, is someone gonna pick it up? Is someone gonna go for the turn? And Wolfie's gonna get it, but they do trade a Walker out of piece. We did have McLovin push the 4-lane, get the 4-lane Walker, and likewise, we had Play With Me on the Infernus push the 3-lane and get that Walker. So it will be a 1-for-1 trade in Walkers. However, DMS get the kill advantage, and they get the soul turn in here, or the earn turn in here. So that's a big boost to their economy as they're now up almost 10,000 souls.
Yeah, and remember, they were down. They were down enough that the urn had to be turned in their territory.
Yep.
And that is the power of the new urn changes here, where if this were last patch, Deadlock dudes probably up 15 or 20K right now. Instead, it's DMS that's up 10K. The urn changes have really changed how you go about these fights, especially if you go against characters that can be so strong up close and personal, like Abrams and Geist in a tight corridor.
Yeah, that's the unfortunate part, because like for WZQT on the Great Talon, it's nice to fight there because you do have the ability to hit multiple people with your charge shot, but the downside is you can't really escape easily. There's not really a lot of places you can play from here. So like you just mentioned, if you're a team who likes to get in the face of their opponents, especially Saf, you're almost not, you physically can't miss a charge in some of those areas that they were fighting in, that it provides so much damage, not to mention Geist as well, with your 1, so you can create a lot of like territory control with that as well once you get his max rank, which currently isn't at the moment. Very hard for Deadlock dudes to go for a fight there, and I'm kind of surprised they did commit for it.
Yeah, and I mean, it's good and bad on the Great Talon note there, where, yeah, you get more value off your charge shot, but also you get 0 value out of his highest DPS move and just being able to leap into the air and drop, very high damage from afar. You're way more vulnerable. And speaking of vulnerable, Polyhex in on to Play With Me, trying to get away, finding Word, catches him in the end. Quick little pick off here for Deadlock dudes. See the shelter comes on down as they look for more. Yamato just trying to get away. No ult burn here just yet. Kelvin though goes down. That's a huge power slash, Jason.
That is insane as he continues to go for the charge here, looking for Hayes, is going to back away. Still hasn't had to use the Shadow Transformation. Honestly, mid-boss might be exactly what they want to go for here as they quickly retreat away. A fantastic push. Again, we see the power of Yamato. We see how deadly you can be. The question for me now looking at this is, what are they going to do to contest? Great Owl comes in, but honestly, it's not going to stop this team from committing to this mid-boss, and there's no one trying to contest on Deadlock dude's side. This is going to be DMS in the driver's seat. Still only about a 10K soul advantage, though, considering what's kind of progressed and transgressed since.
Yeah, but now this does mean Deadlock dudes have to play way more defensive for the next 3 minutes. Because it's not just the fact that, okay, you've lost Rejuvenator, right? It's also the fact that if you trade out and have an even fight in middle, you're still going to be giving up a huge amount of push because of the fact that the other team has such advantageous spawns off the Rejuvenator. The ideal world is to not trade, period, which means you have to give up map control in the process, Jason.
Well, giving up the map control means you're not going to get any of these buffs either, as that's going to be DMS securing the left and right-hand side buff. which can make it even harder now for Deadlock dudes to kind of survive the onslaught that's going to be coming their way. I guess the only upside is for them, if you're fighting at one of these walkers, it is a pretty decent place for a great talent to fight. But I don't know if it's going to be enough, considering some of these players are so strong, so fed. If you see Yamato on site, or Psycho on Yamato, going to be going in for the dive.
Dives on in, last stand out from Gordon in response. Yamato getting poked down. No ultimate to be had. Engaging the pressure from Talon. In over the top, looking for Infernus. Charge shot to the back. And item stuff here, Jason. You know, the interesting thing, the tier 3 items don't surprise me. The big trend between last week and now, a lot more lockets being bought. People realizing the power of it.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, I mean, it's good, right? Like any healing you can kind of do in the midst of the fight is always going to be insanely good. And I feel like it charges extremely quickly too. Just as a quick note here, because the lead is less than 10K, remember it's 10% we're looking at here, it's going to be a mid-turn turn-in, which is exactly where DMS wants to fight here. And they do have such a man advantage that I see no way Deadlock dudes are going to contest this unless they get caught out and pushed on.
It does look like they're starting to rotate over. Kelvin can drop the shelter. But for now, Infernus just goes on there, gets drilled by charge shot, gets a turn in, but pays a HP tax in the process. However, Zap able to punish on the shallow. DMS still in a good spot. 2 down for Deadlock dudes. Ooh. And this could be match losing here. The pressure from Elevo comes on in. So DMS, they lose the Abrams. They're still... Deadlock dudes still down 2. And DMS right now just gotta get some serious... I think DMS right now, they're content to get more walkers down.
Yeah, they got the man advantage. They get the flex slot unlocked as well, more importantly. Which is going to be huge. And you see they're just ignoring the Infernus here and going straight for the second walker. As you can see him continue to push, play with me, looking for the 1v1. He should be able to win it, but honestly, Xenon, your job is done. You've got another walker down, giving you, again, more map control around. And we also have the respawn of the Rejuvenator coming back in, so you're not going to be too worried about this.
A lot of pressure still going on into lane 2. Almost everyone present from both teams. Inferno now spreading out the split push, and DMS, they call it, they go, nope, we'll get that walker later. 94K to 109K though, Jason. Still anyone's match.
Yeah, I'm actually, I don't know how you feel, but I'm kind of surprised to see it this close, because DMS have had the kill advantage. If we can even see that right now, that'd be nice to see. They also had 2 soul-earned turn-ins, where Deadlock dudes had 0. So DMS Maya should be actually almost even farther ahead than they currently are, even with mid-boss added in. But I feel like they haven't been as punishing and taxing onto Deadlock dudes when it comes to jungle camps.
Well, I think it's jungle camps, and also the fact that even with a kill disparity, there's still been a lot of trades, and the more you trade, the more that it just brings everything very close together. I mean, it is a substantial advantage at 18K, and we're kind of at the point where one more lost team fight probably does it for DMS, if DMS is able to win over Deadlock dudes, but, you know, it doesn't surprise me too much that it's as close as it is. But now for Deadlock dudes here, Jason, they're staying more grouped than not. I think they're very well aware of the fact that one more bad fight would end it for them right here.
Yeah, let's maybe like take stock of things of how we could see Deadlock dudes get back into this game. And I feel like, again, it's going to come into one of these objectives. It's very risky to put a split pusher against a split pusher in the same lane, because if you lose that 1v1 control around the map, not to mention you lose potentially the fight off the back. I'm not sure if my audio might have just cut out for you.
It cut out for a split second.
Yeah, so if you go for the split push and you lose on that 1v1, you're going to lose a lot of real estate, a lot of objectives around the map, and a lot of pressure that your team's going to have to respond with. So I'd almost want to see Deadlock dudes like try to get a push onto your lane and try to maybe get a sneaky gank off where your opponents aren't expecting it, and use that to get some control back, because we will have mid-boss spawning back in soon, not to mention buffs in 45 seconds. You have to, I think, be able to contest one of these if you want to have a chance to come back.
Yeah, I think it's all going to come down to the next turn, which will be in the territory of Deadlock dudes. Also, one thing we haven't touched on too much here, you know, Deadlock is so much of a game where characters need to be relatively close in souls to have an impact. Ashe right now is a frozen shelter bot, and occasionally a snare bot with a rescue beam. That is Ashe's contribution to the game right now, at 12K versus the lowest on DMS being 18K and the highest being 27K. The amount that Ashe can do in the game right now, besides very basic support, is low, Jason.
Yeah, and I feel like as a Kelvin as well, you don't want to necessarily fall too far behind when it comes to souls. I mean, that's such a stupid statement to make, but let me kind of explain why. Well, I'm not gonna have a chance to explain why. Speaking of Kelvin, Ashley's gonna get caught out. He's gonna go down.
Yeah, Ashley, target number 1. No shelter even able to be used. You see here, DMS on the hunt. McLovin chased down. Prestis moving to and fro. Soul Exchange still on deck. 6v4 right now for DMS as they look to put this one away. High pressure onto the Geist. Rescue beam, not enough to save. But it's Deadlock dudes. Still down 3. They even it up though here, Jason.
Yeah, they're not out just yet. Now. They still have Xenon alive, who's going to be in the vicinity. They do have Elevote there as well. WZQT, not the best position for him to fight him, but can still do a lot of damage, especially has the owl up as well. They can continue to kite here. You can see Great Talent above doing some insane damage over to Hapex, who might actually fall from this one. And this is actually should be Deadlock Dudes being able to turn this around.
They almost have the Ivy. Elevote just needs a little bit more. Ivy falls. Elevote 282 HP. Gets caught down. Xenon's been living with no HP. Gets the rescue beam. Very solid left click damage. Ashley rejoins the fight. Drops shelter in on the Yamato. Forces out the ult. Fuck dudes. Trying to make the most of this as respawns come in. See the Veil come down from Psycho. It's still not gonna be enough.
I mean, the fight's not even over just yet. Respawns have come back through. These two teams are not want to give it this fight whatsoever, as it still seems to be Deadlock Dudes winning out on this fight when they had such a disadvantage. Yeah, they're going to lose out on buffs, but honestly, with mid-boss up, I feel like this is a very viable opportunity for them. This could be the turnaround exactly what they needed. And honestly, WZQT, I feel like him and Xenon and Elevote, the way they're able to kite DMS so consistently in that fight, opened up opportunities for WZQT to put out a ton of damage, and they're going to go for the mid-boss here. The contest, you got to be careful. Hapex could come in on the Ivy and steal this.
And they're looking for the steal. They're going on in. Abrams charge in. The owl is down. Who's going to get it? It's DMS. Jason, DMS gets the rejuvenator. Wolfie with the fall through on the lightning ball. And what a disaster for Deadlock Dudes, who had nearly climbed the mountain.
The owl was perfect. It got a big stun off, but Saf got an even bigger stun off, allowing Prestis to come in and get the heavy melee onto it. The steal comes through. DMS now, this should be them on the warpath. They even pick up the urn as well, knowing the enemy team's down. It's in enemy territory, but they don't give a flying F, because it's going to be the easiest turn-in of their lives. They're looking to push now onto the base Guardians here, and this might have been the defense completely decimated for DMS.
Oh, what a heartbreaker for Deadlock Dudes. They have a perfect extended team fight with great kiting from WZQT, Elevote, and Xenon. And the mid-boss just goes against them. And now, DMS, one good fight away from getting in to our champions match. Deadlock Dudes, though, Jason, even down 30K, there's still options to potentially bring this one back. They have gotten significantly more limited. Although Geist tries to get away, gets swapped on in. Elevote says, no, get back here.
As Peter Griffin would say, ladies and gentlemen, don't get penisy here. Don't get too cocky. You still need to win this game, and you still have an even harder challenge coming up after this with Pojilaya, Skumbriya, our reigning champions from last week. The first team to take down Buff Enjoyers here at the Deadlock Fight Night. So now with Deadlock Dudes getting that kill, it's not going to amount to much, because Prestis has a Rejuvenator, gonna respawn back in, not too big of a deal. We do have about a minute 30 towards buffs, so I'm kind of curious if Deadlock Dudes will go for the contest on that yet again, like we saw previously, which actually gave them such a nice advantage because they were able to kite out things consistently, again, as we saw before.
So you have a quick pause here where maybe someone's restarting, or who knows? There's a variety of reasons why players may pause, but we also get a look at the Talon items here, Jason, which are pretty interesting, where, of course, we haven't seen a lot of Talon in Deadlock Fight Night historically, and, well, as I say that, we swap off, but I was going to say Spiritual Overflow, also very favored at times in the late game, and for Talon it makes perfect sense given this game.
And he actually went for Superior Stamina first as his first tier 3 item, because he knows and he appreciates how important mobility is going to be in these fights. So a very smart pickup in that order for him. I was looking over at McLovin actually with the silencer. Like, that can be something that's quite surprising, something that we can kind of be cut off guard, because we did see before Prestis, he did get silenced by McLovin before and wasn't able to pull off the soul swap, so he wasn't able to stay alive in one of those prior fights where we did see Deadlock Dudes win. So I some pretty smart pickups, to be honest, with what Deadlock Dudes are kind of running here.
Yeah, I mean, I think Deadlock Dudes have played smart, and you think about what brought them low is that, yeah, maybe the mid-boss decision in retrospect wasn't the greatest, but it made sense on paper when they went into it. They've been a smart team. It just, in Deadlock, you have one misjudged fight, and it can go very much against you.
Deadlock dudes, come on. You gotta go for these buffs, man. They're gonna be respawning here in about 20 seconds time. You need to make sure to deny these away from DMS because they still have Rejuvenator right now, and technically DMS can fight here, lose the fight, and still be back up in time before Deadlock dudes are able to punish them off of that mistake. So you got to be very careful for Deadlock dudes here.
Well, the buff is coming up, and it might be an all-out melee for this left buff. Elevote already going in, knockdown over the top. You see the pressure on the Talon. Abrams, charge! Other side of the fight, Infernus just roast 2. And you see how the Abrams hot pursuit Warpstone finds WZKQT. And Jason, that might be it. It's a clean 4 for nothing. And DMS might be on the victory lap.
I don't even care if Saf died in that 1v1 against WZQT. His job was done. He kept that Grey Talent out of the fight completely, making the only really damage coming through at a Xenon, which isn't going to be your ideal person to do damage, and then McLovin thereafter, and I guess Shallowy as well. But we do see DMS pushing the base, and I mean, Deadlock dudes, I don't think they're going to defend it. They're not even at their base right now. They're just kind of in the middle of the map.
Well, they got all of 10 seconds to get on back. Respawns are coming in, so they do get an attempt at a defense here. And I think DMS, from the looks of it, Jason, they're going to play it safe. It's a best of one, winner take all, so to speak, to get into the champions match. So even though I think there's a world where they could have finished there, they're going to say, we're going to play it smart. We got a big lead. We got a big lead both in souls and in pushing. We don't need to end this just yet.
I mean, think about what happened before. Speaking of... Ooh, okay, he actually was trying to steal the urn away, but he gets stunned for the knockdown, so the urn does get dropped.
Wait,
DMS, I mean, he's going back, but he didn't pick up either. But
it's like Rescue Beam isn't going to be back up yet.
Exactly. I think DMS, though, they kind of realized, well, we almost threw the game where the fight Deadlock dudes won, so let's not have it happen again. And with the urn, you're going to force a team fight. Again, you're forcing a team fight in kind of close quarters, where WZQT is going to have the roughest time to fight. So a pretty smart pickup here, and DMS, this could be the push, the fight to end the game.
Yeah, and, you know, contesting urn here, I feel like it's something you want to do, but it's also, as you mentioned, this is going to be a more closed-in urn fight. So even though it's on the Deadlock dude side of the map, it's not necessarily the best area for them to fight. And the way they're positioning right now, with 2 people gone, I don't think they're contesting it, Jason. I think they're letting it go.
Yeah, you have to. You really have to. If anything, you just kind of split push somewhere. But the problem is there's no ward, or there's no walker in the lane 3 or 4 to take, and you don't want to go lane 1 or 2 because that's where the urn turn is going to be, and they will get the commit onto this one. So again, taking an even bigger lead. And I mean, 50k. So I don't know about you, ZP, but I look at the 50k and I'm like, if you can't close a game out with a 50k lead like this, then it says to me that you're not necessarily a team who's like super confident in your own play. Now, I understand it's a best of one, but 50k at the highest level of play is such an astronomical soul lead that it should be almost impossible for you to lose. But I think they're just going to play it smart, go for mid boss, force a fight here if they have to.
Yeah, not only is it a big lead, but also in terms of threats for Deadlock dudes, it's not like they have a Dynamo walking through that door that could theoretically turn a 50k fight, right? There's nothing for Deadlock dudes that you have to respect on that level, but for DMS, I think they're just playing as safe as could be. Mid boss is coming up, and you know, look at this. Is Deadlock dudes even gonna go in for the steal right now? You'd think they'd be a little bit further if they were.
I mean,
I think they're going for base fight. They're going for base fight. Owl.
Okay. I mean, it's not a super long cooldown, so not big of a deal. But now Deadlock dudes have to somehow defend against this, which, I mean, I don't even need to say how difficult that's going to be, but they do have the security of their own base and positions to play in, especially WZQT, right? He can play basically in the respawn area with just his charge shots almost alone, putting out a lot of damage.
Well, I think they want a good swap to start things off, but right, they open things up, dive onto the Kelvin, able to get away. Abrams, seismic slam, dives on in, looking for Elevote. They get rid of Elevote real early. 2 down, and now they can just move to the pit here, Jason, and finish it all out.
The Paradox just got demolished there like a ragdoll, and that will indeed do it. DMS gonna finish things off, advance once again here to the grand finals to play up against Pojilaya Skumbriya as they take down Deadlock dudes in quick fashion.
Yeah, great play coming in from DMS. But the thing you have to look back here, Dan, of course, you were watching all of it. That play in mid, where Deadlock dudes had an incredible fight. They dragged it out for a really long period of time. They won the fight. They go to mid, and it all falls apart.
Yeah. The fact that the steal happened, it is pretty tragic. You kind of want to see what would have happened had they actually converted there. The game would have gone really interesting because they probably would have gotten the space they needed. The soul advantage would have been closed up. And suddenly you could start to see, okay, well, what is the potential of this comp in the late game? But we didn't really get to see that. But what we did get to see, Jason, is the different dynamics with the urn. I actually felt like there was a way more of a strategical narrative that we could draw in terms of casters by just seeing the fact that, oh, hey, there are multiple options here. Oh, hey, actually, the team that's ahead, they've got to go into territory that's like really close spaces. And then you're just starting to think, well, what is our comp good for? Like, okay, we've got a Kelvin, we've got a Warden, we've got some good close range stuff, but maybe ultimately the comp wasn't there. But yeah, I just thought that was interesting because that's a new thing we talked about at the top of the show.
I mean, that might have been like the big, not the big turning point, but one of the big points that we had to look at in that match was the fact that you saw them push into their enemy territory to look for that fight. But you're up against a comp who kind of wants to be in your face. Like, there's just so much AoE damage being done by the side of DMS in tight quarters that it's really hard for you to contest.
Yeah, you take a
Ooh.
look at the stats here, and you wonder, okay, well, is Talon now going to be a big pick? Well, look at the damage that WZQT put in on the Talon. I mean, we saw it, just sort of the eye test in the middle of the game, but my word, even for a team that ends up losing the game by 50k souls, you cannot deny the impact that WZQT had
Oh,
on
yeah.
Talon. Not at all.
Insane. 31K being done there. I mean, the next closest is what, like 28K out of Wolfie, who had to get to 45K souls, like 15K more than WCQT, but obviously, Wolfie was farming. I think one thing we saw there, Dan, is that Great Talon, insanely good at the moment, but it is still kind of hard to make him work when a comp can get in your face with knockdown or force fights in these close quarter combats.
Yeah, it does. I feel like you definitely want a slightly different comp around it, like you say, so you have more of that cover, so you have the ability for you to be able to kind of jump in after the fact, so you can pick a good position and you can get a lot of good charged shots off and so on. But I do think the dynamic is very interesting because one thing that Talon does bring, which I think is a nice natural counter to Shivs and Abrams of the world, is you want to be trying to find either anti-heal or some like mass burst spirit damage. And the latter category is what Grey Talon provides. So I actually like Grey Talon and how Grey Talon might end up being a really nice answer to those types of heroes. But yeah, we didn't really get to see it a lot here. And you can see, for me, obviously, one thing that like stands out is, hey, you got to carry. The Haze was not able to get online, and this is the danger when your team is kind of losing, like generally in the map control department, because that means that your team is having to spin plates maybe elsewhere, and you can't create the space and safety for your carry to get farmed to have the power spike at the relevant points of the match.
And CP, I
Well,
want to jump in really quickly because I didn't even look at this until DDK brought it up. But look at the player damage out of McLovin. Not to like focus on him in a negative way, but 7K. Where Ashton on the other side, who had 11K souls list, still had 9.6K because he was there. I think the one caveat I'll give McLovin is he was split pushing more often. He was able to get a walker, for instance, in like a trade. So he wasn't there necessarily for the fights, but I think feel like they almost needed him there a lot more than he actually was.
yeah, I mean, I think you nailed it when you talk about the split pushing. But on the other hand, too, you think about overall contribution to the amount of team fights we saw. The Kelvin that was broke as broke could be for most of the game still had more damage than the Haze, which at the most is just going to be an indictment of, okay, how many times would have been better if you were able to integrate the Haze more into your team fight there versus being off split pushing, because yeah, that is a pretty tough disparity. And yeah, numbers don't entirely tell the whole story. You have to look at where people were and why. But yeah, it's one of those things where Hayes continues to be a pick that you don't see as often in pro play, and I think more than any other carry is also a character that can underperform relative to the norm.
I was actually more than fine with how Ashty played. Funny enough, with the Kelvin, I feel like the whole job was out of him, Xenon, and Elevote was just keep WZQT alive, and we saw what did happen when Great Talon was left alone and was able to survive with the stuns, with the slows, the binding words, etc. It's just unfortunate that they had that mid boss fight and they lost out on that and the Rejuvenator.
Well, we are going to go and take a quick look, Dan, at our player of the match. And player of the match, this was a tough call across the board for DMS because it was pretty much a team effort. But Psycho 13 on the Yamato, and Psycho is also, we've just seen him play Yamato pretty much in every tournament since Deadlock has begun, even all the way back to the Aurora Masters.
Yeah, and one thing that's really great about Yamato that I think kind of, I got to sort of reference a little bit some of the changes that we've had with the urn and so on. We did have that early fight in enemy urn territory, and which is a close range engagement. And so, you are looking to a Yamato who's able to kind of get those flying strikes around corners. If you get a good connection, is able to perform in pretty much any range. And obviously the long range, you're not really expecting Yamato to do a lot, but into the close to medium range, performs a lot better than a lot of other carries might, where they would need like a prolonged, let's say line of sight, which can get broken all of the time. So, just showing the versatility and really doing the job of being able to crack open those initial burst amounts of damage and picks in those fights, that really, I think, put a lot of pressure on the opposing team. Again, I think comp-wise, it really helped to expose where the comp's weaknesses were.
Well, our champions match has been set. DMS, they defeat Deadlock dudes. They move on. Coming up next, it's going to be DMS taking on Pojilaya, Skumbriya in our champions match.